If you clicked on this video, I'm going to save you guys some time and tell you the answers to the title. Number one, learn what the word mechanics actually means in League of Legends. I'm going to talk about that a little bit in the video. Number two, you control way more of the game than you think. And number three, and this is the biggest one, time. That's it. These three things, in my opinion, some of the most understated reasons why the average League player isn't climbing. And if that's not enough, I'm going to explain why I think that's true and why I think these three things are really, really important. So appreciate you guys sticking around. Let's get into it. Point number one is mechanics. Most people do not understand what mechanics in League of Legends actually is. And in my opinion, it is very different from mechanics in a lot of other esports titles. It's not similar to reaction time-based mechanics in other games. So for example, in FPS, if I say I'm really mechanically good at CSGO, what that probably means is I am really, really accurate with my mouse. My recoil correction is super great. I can flick really well, or I have good reaction times. That's a large portion of what makes up mechanics in kind of reaction-based games. League of Legends is not like that. So good mechanical players in League, what does that actually mean? In my opinion, it means they're way more like good poker players or chess players. You guys know I love chess, talking about chess on this channel, but that's true from my experience and from speaking and playing at a high level for a while. So what do I mean by that? Well, basically, instead of reacting to everything at a split second and kind of the split moment decision making, which is, you know, what most mechanics conversations seem to revolve around, a lot of League players are actually about prediction. They basically map out all the possibilities in their head before it happens, and then they react in the kind of plan they've already laid out by predicting what the enemy could do. That is mechanics in a nutshell. What do I mean by that? Well, basically, out of all the esports like CSGO, Rocket League, Valorant, League requires way less twitchy reactions. When I'm about to make an outplay, like a Thresh Flay, using my Flay to interrupt something, I'm very rarely reacting purely to what the enemy's doing. I'm not just going in blind, I'm prepping myself. And you can do this for much more advanced things, especially top laners, for example. Top laners who know that they can 1v2, what they're doing is often they're running through the play repeatedly in their head, and they try and plan accordingly. And almost every really insane League player I've noticed has this crazy ability to kind of plan 3 steps ahead. And finally, the last point I want to say on this is, if you've ever played chess, and I know I'm going back to chess, sorry, but if you've ever played chess and you know how few options you have if you only think one move in advance. If you're only thinking, if I move this piece to here, I can maybe attack as queen, you have very limited options. If you up the amount of moves you're thinking ahead, for example, you go into a chess engine and you bump up the depth, so it's thinking 3, 5, 10 moves ahead, you're going to notice that the amount of moves that you can make is insanely high compared to one move. That's what I'm trying to get at. So mechanics is not the reaction time, but often when I'm coaching, students fail to understand that they need to think about the fight before it happens. And that's how all these crazy high elo players can consistently outplay people, because they often know the fight's coming and know what's going their way, and they kind of just react accordingly. They just already have it in their head. Point number two is about controlling more of the game than you think. And here's my example for this. I've been playing a lot of Apex Legends recently, and I could hop into a lobby, and if hypothetically my aim was good enough, I could demolish a match entirely on my own. I could basically carry my whole team on my back if needed and use the enemy team as toilet paper. In many esports, the influence your teammates have on you is still significant. It's not as direct. You can't feel it as much as sometimes you can in League. In League, it sometimes feels like you are chained to your teammates, and if they sink, you are going to be sleeping with the fishes and begging for Riot to have better matchmaking. In fact, that's one of the main complaints I hear is, I would be higher elo if it wasn't for XYZ, my teammates, blah, blah, blah. Well, what I need to get across here is League is very similar in a lot of ways to those other esports, to things like Apex. You actually can 1v5 if you understand how to do it in League, but people come into League thinking they can do it in the same way as in like shooters or Apex or, you know, other games where you can kind of just take over if you have a big enough skill gap. In League, it's a little different. You need to be a little bit more subtle about it, and there's different ways of influencing your teammates. They have this idea that League is so reliant on the team, and from a quick glance, I agree, it looks like that. So how do you actually break away from that? So number one is, if you study or at least listen to the good players when they play League, yes, a lot of streamers, including me, we moan about our teammates on stream, but what you'll notice is they're honestly constantly looking for reasons about whether they played that fight right. Should they have flashed that? Should they have gone top lane while enemy jungle was ganking bot? They're constantly asking themselves questions about, did they get the most out of it? Did they squeeze the most life out of the enemy in the play? That's a very common mentality for like the really good players I play with. If you've ever seen The Last Dance, that mentality is summed up by, I think there's a quote in that Netflix documentary about Michael Jordan where he said, "Give me the ball and get the fuck out the way." And that's like a quote that I have no idea if that's true, that Michael Jordan actually said that, but it's stuck in my brain. And that's a mentality a lot of these insane players, that even in Challenger, these players feel like you're playing against 3 players, you know, in their position. They just seem so much better than the rest of the league. What these players do is basically, no matter what is happening on the map, they are forcing something. They are doing something proactive or making you make a decision. No matter what happens, you can't sit still and just sit back. And that is why these players feel like they have way more control over the game than other people. They are never sitting back. And actually, Coach Curtis has a really good kind of analogy for this. He calls it the gladiator mentality. Basically, you never give up. If you lose a play, it doesn't matter. You go to plan B. And if plan B doesn't work, you go to plan C. And you keep doing something. And eventually the enemy will crack, because at the end of the day, you are better. That is the mentality that you need to adopt. Now, the only thing I want to say about it is don't abuse it. Don't just say like, okay, my teammate's pinging to help with a gank, but I don't really want to. Screw them. Like, give me the ball, you know, fuck those guys. That's not really the right way to apply the mentality. But what you should do is analyze whether you can get the most out of being bot lane and helping their gank, or just leaving and doing something else. And always doing the most valued thing in long run will give you the best results. That's just how it works. And I'll be honest, that's been my goal for the last few months. I've been trying to become one of those players that you see, and when you play against, it's just like, Jesus, dude, Raisins is just all over the map. Like, I cannot breathe. That's the type of player I want to be. All right, number 3, and this one is actually kind of related to number 1 and number 2 in a lot of ways, is time. I said a lot of League players just have no idea the sheer amount of games that it takes to become good at League. And there's a good reason for that. League is an extremely complicated game. Like, if you think about the sheer number of interactions between champions, that's already astronomically large number. And if you think about the amount of interactions, and then you throw in items, you throw in levels, you throw in the changes that Riot makes to the map, to the game itself, to the champion balance, it starts to get out of hand really quickly. No human being can go through all of that information and store it all in their brain. So what actually we end up doing as high elo players is basically just playing enough that our pattern recognition kicks in, and we kind of just notice things about the game, little like patterns and little trends here and there that we pick up on, and we force ourselves to be in those situations enough that sometimes those situations come up again, and I remembered what I did in them so that I can change and be better in that situation in the future. That's literally it. And I actually had a really interesting analogy for this. So if you guys have ever seen this little triangle where basically you have sleep, social life, and your studies, you get to pick 2 of those things. If you want to sleep and you want a social life, well, you don't get to study. If you want to study and a social life, well, good luck sleeping. This is the way it works with League, but you got to remove one of those things and replace it with League. So if you want to get really, really good at League, or at least good enough past your peak, you have to put in the time. Frankly, League is a game that does involve a large number of games to find your true rank. A lot of players come to me and they say, why can't I climb? And I look at their profile and they've played 50 games in this season. And I'm thinking, I play 50 games in a month, and I am actually one of the players who plays very few games. These players play an absolute order of magnitude more games than me, so I have to be more efficient in the time I'm playing. So if you're only playing 50 games a season, buddy, you gotta probably get 20 times the value out of those games that I'm getting out of my game, because I'm just playing more than you, all right? It's just math. So you have to accept that you are going to have to put in a ridiculous amount of games. Now, if you want to hit like an average elo, like you want to just push to gold, maybe plat, diamond, yeah, you won't have to put in like insane master, grandmaster, challenger level amount of games. So when you go in game, my advice would be concentrate on what you can do, focus on your mechanics, as in focus on what could come your way. How is the enemy going to gank you and how are you going to outplay it? That's number 1. Number 2, understand that you can control how your teammates act in a lot of ways. They use things like pings to tell them where ganks are coming. Understand that pressuring the enemy on the other side of the map or cross mapping will often, in a lot of ways, prevent them from committing super hard on the other side if you're fast. And number 3, you got to put in the time. If you don't play the game, you won't improve. So that's my 3 tips, and 3 tips which frankly I don't think get talked about enough. I hope this video is useful, and if you want me to make a video specifically on any of the things I just talked about, drop it in the comments. I will be happy to try and give you guys some knowledge about how I overcame all of these issues, because they were all issues for me, believe it or not, and how I became a much more consistent player, because frankly I enjoy challenging myself, and I would never give up League for the world because it gives me an endless challenge that I can never perfect. So kind of why I like League. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Appreciate you guys, and good luck in your solo game. Yeah.